Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Political Excess. Today, let's do a deep dive into another governor's election, and I think it's time we took a look at Florida. So let's get on Ballotpedia and get a little bit of background about this race. The current governor is Republican Ron DeSantis, and he is running for re-election to a second term. 4 years ago, when he first won election, he won a very narrow race by about 4/10 of a point. Prior to serving as governor, he did spend some time in the U.S. House. His opponent on the Democratic side is Charlie Crist. And Crist has a long history in Florida politics. He actually did serve as the governor of Florida from 2007 to 2011. At that time, he was a Republican. He did become an independent and then later a Democrat. And he was most recently serving as a Democrat in the U.S. House from the St. Petersburg area. So let's take a look and see what happened in their primaries. Well, Charlie Crist, he did have a semi-competitive primary. He won with over 59% of the vote to Nikki Fried's 35%. That looked like it might be more competitive than it was, but in the end, Crist won that comfortably. And as for Ron DeSantis, he was unopposed in his primary, and there will also be a Libertarian and Independent candidate on the ballot as well. So let's move down here and see how this race is rated. Well, all of the three main rating sites, Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, and Larry Sabato, they all have it at likely Republican. My own rating is also likely Republican, and I still think that. The only difference now, though, is there has been that recent hurricane that could give another couple of points of a boost to Ron DeSantis, and he could be getting close to double digits. It's hard to say this would be a safe margin, given it is Florida, and they frequently have narrow elections. But it's not out of the question if somehow DeSantis was able to pull off a 10-point margin of victory. He is relatively popular, and he's only going to come out of this natural disaster with a little bit more momentum. Yes, there always could be a last-minute scandal, and that could lower his chances significantly, but I think even in the worst-case scenario, DeSantis still wins by a couple of points. So the safe bet is to put this at likely for DeSantis. If we scroll under here, we could take a look at the campaign finance. And we can see that Ron DeSantis is greatly outnumbering Charlie Crist. Charlie Crist does have a lot of money there. I know he would love to take out DeSantis, as every Democrat would, but DeSantis has raised so much money. Yes, he might run for president. I don't think the campaign finance is everything. Sometimes it matters a lot less. But it's clear Charlie Crist, even with all his money, he is the definite underdog in this race. So let's go down farther here and take a look at the county voting trends on a presidential level. And this shows us that 46.6% of the population lives in 9 counties that are solid Democratic. And that's defined on Ballotpedia as having voted for the Democrat for president in the last 3 cycles. On the other end, 40.2% of the population lives in 52 counties that voted for the Republican in the last 3 cycles. And then there's a few more counties trending toward the Democrat or the Republican on a presidential level, but those just voted for one or the other in the last 1 or 2 presidential elections. So Florida has been regarded as a little bit more of a red-leaning state over the past decade, but if you only focus on these top-line presidential county winners, the Democrats are actually the ones who have more of the population living in those counties. So we can go down here and take a look at some of these counties. And the thing to keep in mind is the shading does not indicate margins. It just indicates if they voted for the Democrat or the Republican for president in the last 1, 2, or 3 presidential elections. But you can hover over any of these counties and it will show you the margins. So there are some deep red counties here. A lot of them are in the Panhandle. And those voted for Donald Trump last time by 70, even eclipsing 80% in some of these counties. If you look at those trends, you can see 8 years ago in 2012, most of them have shifted a number of points to the right. Most of these deep red counties don't have a ton of population in them, but all those wide margins do add up. The Democrats do have some blue counties of their own, the most notable of which is Miami-Dade, and as you can see, Donald Trump actually did better in 2020 than he had done in 2016. And above that, Broward County and Palm Beach County, those have a lot of population in them, and those also did shift a little bit toward the right. And the central part of the state, Orlando and around those counties, the I-4 corridor, is usually regarded as a critical bellwether for who's going to win a statewide election. And Pinellas County, that's another county that's actually just about on the verge of flipping toward the Republicans for president. And that's also right near where Charlie Crist is from. So that would be a little embarrassing if he does lose this county. So some of these other counties might be close to flipping. They might be trending one way or the other. Democrats still do well in those counties with a large number of people. So let's go back to 2018 and look at the county map for the governor's election. So on first glance, there's a lot of red counties, but those blue counties are still there that we saw for president. But if we switch over to look at the margins, we can see that the shading does indicate there's a lot more deep red counties, again, with less people in them, and very few dark blue counties, but that was enough for DeSantis to squeak out a very narrow win. So you can look through these counties if you'd like to take a look at some of these margins. But let's switch over to YouTube and see what they've got on their channels. Here's Ron DeSantis' channel. He doesn't have a ton on here as of the time I'm making this video, but he's got some shorts, he's got some campaign ads, and he's got some media appearances. Everything you'd expect to see. And here's Charlie Crist's channel. He also has some ads, some human interest type of stories, and of course some of his campaign events. We could also take a look at their official campaign websites. So here is Ron DeSantis's if you want to donate, purchase any of his merch, or maybe see where he stands on some of the issues. And here is Charlie Crist's channel if you want to support him, see what he's up to, his events, or read about his stance on the issues. So how about any debates? Well, there was one scheduled, but due to the hurricane, it has been rescheduled. So now it will be Monday, October 24th. It does seem like this will be the only debate, and I think that's kind of a shame. I would like to see 2 or 3 debates. I know Charlie Crist would love to debate as many times as he can because he is trailing. So I do think Ron DeSantis should give the people of Florida 2 debates, but at least we're going to get the one, so everybody's going to be watching that. We'll see what happens. So let's switch over to Wikipedia here and take a look at some endorsements. Here's Ron DeSantis's, and there's actually not a ton on here. It's possible they have yet to be added, but he does have a few, and Charlie Crist, he has a lot more. A lot of these are members of the state legislature, but he's got other ones as well, including a bunch of Florida newspapers. And that takes us down to the polling. And we can see Ron DeSantis has a 6.3% lead on Real Clear Politics. He's at 49.3% to 43.0% for Charlie Crist. 538, it's roughly the same kind of a margin. So let's go down here and take a look at the individual polls. Almost all of these do show Ron DeSantis with a lead. Some of them show DeSantis over 50% of the vote. Most of them show Charlie Crist in the low to mid 40s. This one polling firm, the Political Matrix / Listener Group, that has consistently shown Charlie Crist with a lead all throughout this year and even last year. I've looked into some of these polls. I do think those polls have greatly oversampled Democrats, and they do appear to be an outlier as none of these other polling firms really show DeSantis trailing. Some of them are close. It's not like DeSantis is going to win this thing by 10 or 15 points without any question. It could be more narrow, but the polls do show DeSantis to be the clear favorite. So let's compare these poll results to how accurate they were back in 2018. So remember, that was only about 0.4% apart. DeSantis had 49.6%. And all of these polls at the very end, with the exception of Trafalgar, they actually showed Andrew Gillum with a lead. And pretty much all of the polls throughout the entire month of October, and even before that, they also generally showed Andrew Gillum with an advantage. So in that race, and that was a blue wave year, and this is a situation where the polls did not reflect the end result. Just based on the polls, DeSantis should have taken a narrow loss there, but instead, he took a narrow win. Finally, let's move on to Predict It to see where people are putting their money. And this shows us that Ron DeSantis is at 94 cents favored to win re-election. Charlie Crist, he's at 8 cents. So this is overwhelming. Ron DeSantis is very likely to win re-election. I can't say it's impossible Charlie Crist can pull out some kind of a win at the last second, but everything is pointing against Crist and in favor of DeSantis. Personally, I am surprised Charlie Crist actually ran again for governor and he won nomination. He already was the governor as a Republican. He did not run for re-election. He did try to run for the U.S. Senate in 2010 as an independent. He lost that race. He was the nominee for governor in 2014. He narrowly lost that race to Rick Scott. So Charlie Crist has been around the block more than a couple of times. His name recognition is obviously through the roof, but he switched parties. He's run for too many different offices. His track record for electoral success is mixed at best. I thought Charlie Crist was not even going to run again, but if he did, I thought he would have lost in the primary. I thought voters want to try a new direction, probably go for Nikki Fried. But instead, they're going for Charlie Crist again. I don't necessarily think Crist is a bad candidate. His personality seems fine. I just think Ron DeSantis, he has more energy, he's more exciting, he's more firing up his base. The state has shifted a little bit toward the right. It's a red-leaning year. There's just much more excitement around Ron DeSantis. Crist is focusing hard on abortion, and Ron DeSantis being hostile toward the media and his ambitions to run for president. It's all fair for him to point out. It's just that when you stack them up against the issues Ron DeSantis is strong at, DeSantis is going to win. A lot of people despise Ron DeSantis. A lot of people think he's a rock star. So having said all that, I think DeSantis is favored to win, probably now in the mid to high single digits. And will this be it for Charlie Crist if he loses, or will he run for another office? That's a good question. But anyway, that is a deep dive into this Florida governor's election. Let me know in the comments, what do you think the margin is going to be? Is there any chance of an upset in this race, or does DeSantis have this completely in the bag? Let me know down below. And if you enjoy this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.